Welcome to TheKillFile, your favorite true crime podcast. I'm your host, Brittany Spears. Each week, we will explore the dark corners of true crime, unsolved mysteries, and murder. Join me as we uncover secrets, investigate evidence, and dive into the chilling details of some of the most fascinating cases. Get ready for a journey into the dark unknown because, in TheKillFile, nothing stays buried forever. Hey guys, welcome to episode 50 of TheKillFile. Wow, we have made it to episode 50. I cannot believe it. I'm going to take a second and get a little mushy and just tell you guys how grateful I am that you guys keep on coming back week after week for another episode to share our passions and interest in true crime. When I first started TheKillFile last summer, I told myself that I would do this for at least 2 years and then see where I'm at. Not only do I enjoy doing this so much, but I wanted to turn it into, at the very least, a side job where I could make some money from sponsors or listeners at some point because I felt like I wanted to share the stuff I find so damn fascinating with the world and hopefully learn a little something in each episode as well. We aren't at the money-making part yet for the podcast, but hopefully we are headed in the right direction and it doesn't stop me from working my ass off each and every week to find a case, research the case immersively, script out what I am going to say with at least 10 pages each week, record the episode while messing up and saying dumb shit, editing the episodes each week, which takes a long time, and then simultaneously doing my own social media and raising my children and running my household. It is so hard, but so worth it, and I love doing this, and that is why each week I ask you guys to help out the podcast by sharing or commenting or posting or just telling one damn friend about it, because it will all help to bring people to us, and hopefully they will join us as listeners, and eventually we will together create this business that we can expand and build on, and it will continue to get better and better. I have told you guys this in the past, but it's been a while since I've said it. When I started TheKillFile, I didn't know a damn thing about podcasts, like nothing. I didn't know how to record, I didn't know how to edit, and more than anything, I was a nervous wreck when speaking into the microphone. Even though I knew I had to edit and stuff before, my stage fright is just so bad when it comes to speaking in front of a bunch of people that it crippled me in the beginning. But I think it's safe to say that I'm getting better and more confident and more comfortable, and as a result, the episodes are getting better and better. I cringe going back and listening or thinking of you guys listening to the beginning episodes of the podcast because not only was the editing awful, but my voice is kind of choppy and it was rough for sure. But the listeners who have been encouraging and kind to me have really helped me open up and do this better, and I think it's only going to continue to get better each week. I know a ton of podcasters feel the same way about the beginning of their own shows, and now I get it. So thank you guys for being here each week, and I hope that you will continue to listen and share TheKillFile with anyone and everyone you think may want to listen. Okay. The reminders for today, since this intro was so long, will just be to rate, review, and subscribe to help people find us. Hit download on that episode, check out the website at thekillfile.com, and find the merch. We have added some new stuff that you guys might love, and I realized not long ago that I had tweaked the shop, and for whatever reason, it reverted a ton of shirts back to plain old white on the Printify platform. So I had to get in there and mix them all up, and now there should be a variety of colors. Also, send in your true crime emails to thekillfilepodcast@gmail.com and get ready for the bonus content this fall. For a few bucks a month, you can get some bonus content and episodes. Okay, so this week will be part 2 of Andrei Chikatilo. If you guys remember from last week, we learned a little bit about his childhood and the famine that was going on at that time in Russia, and also barely got to see the type of stuff that Andrei would do to his victims. This part will be heavier, so fair warning. Trigger warnings, just as a reminder for this case, are going to be brutality on a minor, rape of a minor, sexual assault on a minor, murder, cannibalism, talks of suicide, and just some gnarly graphic descriptions. Let's jump in. During this time in the Soviet Union, the term serial killer or even the thought of these types of people were virtually unknown. According to biography.com about Andrei Chikatilo, quote, evidence of a serial killing or child abuse was something suppressed by the state-controlled media in the interests of public order, end quote. Can you imagine not knowing what is happening in your own area and having someone that you love die because you were unaware? Ugh, that's so fucked up. On June 12th in 1982, and this was just 9 months from the last murder, Andrei was walking home from purchasing some produce when he spotted Lyubov Biruk, who was 13 years old and walking home alone after she had been out shopping. They ended up walking together until Andrei saw a place where they would be hidden. He then grabbed Lyubov and dragged her behind some bushes and out of sight. Andrei started to slash and started stabbing her. And during this, he was doing something that he apparently did many times after this with other victims, but he was basically dry humping her while he was mutilating or he was killing his victims, which would help him achieve an orgasm. The poor girl's body would then be found 2.5 weeks later, and it was known that Andrei had stabbed her 22 times in her chest, neck, head, and her genitals as well. She was also found to have injuries to her eye sockets, which suggested to authorities that Andrei tried to remove her eyeballs. This was said to have happened to different victims as well. After another victim that was dumped near the airport, Andrei would go on to commit his first male victim murder. On August 13th in 1982, Oleg Pozhideyev, sorry if I butchered that, who was just 9 years old, was killed in the woodlands outside of Ern. However, his body was never recovered. This is when it was realized that Andrei didn't care whether his victims were male or female. He didn't care what they looked like, and he didn't even care how old they were. He just used these poor victims as a mean to an end, which is, of course, just a fucking orgasm. He would choose victims that would easily go with him, which is my guess as to why so many were children. September 12th of 1982, so you can see that Andrei is escalating rapidly at this point. He would go on to kill his first adult victim. Irina Karabelnikova, who was a 19-year-old young woman, was lured away from the railroad station. This is when Andrei would also target runaways, sex workers, or anyone who he thought maybe wouldn't really be missed. Basically, marginalized people who he thought would be easy to kill and no one would go looking for them. In Irina's case, she would be found 8 days after her murder, but sadly wouldn't be identified until 3 years later in 1985. Andrei's youngest victim was a 7-year-old boy named Igor Gudkov, and this was the first male victim that was actually linked to the manhunt that ensued to try and find Andrei, the serial killer. Around the time of September 1983, when the body of a 22-year-old young woman had been found, this was the time when the police were said to have had a few working theories as to who or what could be behind the murders. One source said that the police even considered a satanic cult and a gang of organ harvesters, which is a little out there, but I can imagine that at this time they were all just like, what the hell is happening here with all of these victims being found? They also considered the person could be mentally ill, but sadly during this time the definition of mentally ill extended to someone who was gay. Great. Authorities went through mental hospitals to look for suspects, and people were then eliminated. 3 men who were gay were among the group of people who confessed under duress and sadly committed suicide after. During this time, though, police efforts would help to solve 250 sexual assaults and rapes and 95 other unrelated murders. However, I personally would wonder how many of these were accurate if they were forcing people to confess under duress and linking things to other people who could be innocent. So during these times of, in between these murders that I'm sharing with you, there are many more victims being found, but some are missing details or just labeled as murdered, and we don't know their story. So just keep in mind that these are not the only bodies that are being found. There are many, many more. On December 27th, 1983, Sergei Markov, who was a 14-year-old boy, was coming home from his work placement, and sadly, his body would go on to be found in January of 1984 near Novocherkassk, Rostov Oblast in Russia. He was horrifically mutilated with what was said to be upwards of 70 stabs to his chest and neck and his upper torso, and sadly, this victim too was castrated. Andrei's oldest victim was a 45-year-old woman named Marta Ryabenko, was killed in Aviation Park, and her body was found the next day, which was February 22nd, 1984. Dmitry Tashnikov was a 10-year-old boy who apparently was a stamp collector, and this was where Andrei would meet Dmitry at a stamp kiosk on February 24th, 1984. Andrei pretended to be a fellow collector as well. Sadly, this would be enough for Dmitry to be lured away with Andrei alone. However, at this murder scene, there would be found a footprint and some samples of saliva and semen. There were witnesses who were able to put together a sketch of what they believed the predator to look like that people saw Dmitry with before he disappeared. And I'm not kidding you, it's not funny, but I'm not kidding you when I say that this sketch looks like Walter White with hair. I will post it on the TheKillFile socials this week, so check those out. On May 25th, 1984, Andrei would kill a mother and daughter. The mother, 32-year-old Tatiana Petrosian, and daughter 11-year-old Svetlana Petrosian were killed by Andrei outside of Shatko. Tatiana was said to have known Andrei since 1978. Andrei had killed Tatiana, the mother, first, which sadly Svetlana had obviously witnessed. Then, Andrei apparently chased the poor girl for half a mile, where he did catch up to her. Andrei then beat Svetlana with a hammer until she was dead, and then sadly, she was decapitated. Svetlana's remains would be found on July 5th. However, Tatiana wasn't actually identified until the next year, which is crazy. Also, can you imagine being that poor 11-year-old being chased by a fucking maniac, running as fast as you can, hoping with everything that you have that he won't catch up to you? And then he does. It's heartbreaking and terrifying. I absolutely hate being chased. My heart is broken for that little girl. In July 1984, Svetlana Siana, a 20-year-old, was killed in Aviators Park. Svetlana was from Latvia. Her body would be discovered September 9th, 1984. This was the last victim that Andrei confessed to. Andrei, this summer, lost his job with the building company because he had been stealing things from the company that he was working for. Then he was able to get another job at another building company in Rostov by August 1st. The very next day, he had killed another victim, a 16-year-old girl headed to see her sister. This next one is particularly brutal, so just a heads up. August 7th, 1984, Andrei would attack a girl who was 17 years old named Lyudmila Alexieva, who he was able to lure away from a bus stop that was in Rostov when he told her he could point her towards the main bus station, and sadly she believed him. Her body would later be discovered on the banks of the Don River. Authorities would find that her body had several pre-deceased intentional wounds that were not fatal, meaning that he just wanted to hurt Lyudmila. She would be found with 39 stab wounds. She had been disemboweled, and horrifically, her top lip had been cut off and stuffed into her mouth. This is some next-level brutality. Andrei killed 2 more females, one not identified, in a place that he had traveled to for work, where one woman or girl was sadly decapitated. On August 28, 1984, Alexander Chappelle's body, who had been 11 years old, was found on the same banks and not far from where Lyudmila's body was found just 3 weeks earlier, the banks of Don River. Alexander was horrifically castrated, and it would be found that his eyes had been gouged out. It was also thought that his cause of death was strangulation. Ugh, this guy is so horrific. Holy fuck. Also, I wonder why he felt the need to mutilate them so much if the act of killing was enough for his stupid orgasm. Or was it just a hunger that continued to grow and became insatiable? I wonder if somewhere along the way it became about like the brutality versus the level or satisfaction. So on September 6, 1984, Irina Luchinskaya, that's probably not how it's said at all, who was a local librarian, 24 years old, was killed while she had been on her way to a sauna. She, too, was found in Aviators Park. A couple of days after September 13th, there would be 2 undercover agents who had witnessed Andrei attempting to talk to a young woman inside of a bus station in Rostov. They continued to follow Andrei and saw him trying again to talk to young women, and one source said that he was trying to commit frauderism. For those of us who don't know, because I sure shit didn't know that this was the official name of this act, frauderism, is actually the act of touching or rubbing your genitals against another person in a sexual manner. And this, of course, is without their consent. The goal of this is either getting sexual pleasure, satisfaction, or even reaching an orgasm. Ew, it's so creepy. After doing this around town for a while, he would end up in the city center, and this is when the undercover agents arrested Andrei, feeling like they had witnessed enough of his shenanigans. When Andrei was then searched, the authorities would find different lengths of rope, an 8-inch knife, and a fucking jar of Vaseline. I don't know why, but the worst part in that information for me was the Vaseline. Ew, ew, ew. Fucking pervert. When the authorities arrested him, Andrei had actually had a warrant out from, I guess, one of his old bosses for that minor theft, and this actually helped the authorities be able to hang on to Andrei for longer than they normally would have been allowed to. After they did some more work on the investigation, they realized that Andrei matched the description that was given by the witness who had seen that boy Dimitri with Andrei, the sketch that I said looked like a non-bald Walter White. Yep, that one. This allowed them to take blood samples from Andrei, and when those returned, they would see that Andrei's blood type was A, and unfortunately, because the semen samples that were found on 6 of the victims had been found to be type AB, he was basically eliminated as being a suspect to those murders. The only thing they had on him was the theft, and after being sentenced to 1 year in prison for that theft, he ended up serving 3 months, and then of course he was released on December 12th. One source would say that his membership had been revoked as a member of the Communist Party, which I didn't even know was a thing. During the investigation into the murders, the authorities had brought in several mentally ill people who they got to confess to the murders, but luckily a judge on October 8th, 1984, realized that 23 of the murders were probably all the same person, which he was right about, so they let all the people who wrongly confessed go. On August 27th, 1985, a woman named Irina Gulyayeva, who was 18 years old, had been killed near the bus station in Shakti. It was said that she was found the day after she had been killed in an area surrounded by trees. After this victim, Andrei didn't kill in this area for 3 whole years. It was speculated that this could have been because of all of the heat that was brought on by the sheer number of murders in the area. By November of 1985, the investigation into the serial killer was ramping up, and they had 29 different people working under a man named Isa Kostoyev. Together, both Barakov, which if you remember was the senior investigator on the case, and Kostoyev had decided to bring on a relatively new thing known as a forensic psychologist to see if he could give them insight into their potential suspect. Dr. Alexander Buganovsky would be the first person to actually do this for the justice system in Russia, which means it was kind of a big deal. Although there was mounting and irrefutable evidence that this was the work of a serial killer, the bosses of Kostoyev and Barakov believed that serial killers were only a thing that Western countries had to deal with, saying the problem, according to a video I watched about Andrei's crimes created by the Descent into Darkness, was a, quote, symptom of capitalist decadence and indulgence. Boy, were they wrong. Fetisov, the immediate boss of the two, helped convince the higher-ups, and thankfully the psychologist was allowed to help them on the investigation. He wrote a 65-page report into what he thought somebody who would be able to do such heinous crimes would be like. This report would describe Andrei to a T. It said he believed the person to be a reclusive person between 45 and 50 years old with childhood trauma, a person with little luck with women or possibly sexual dysfunction problems. He would have a good education, maybe even a wife and family. He would have sadistic tendencies, and a knife is a symbol for his own penis. Him stabbing his victims is basically a metaphor for sex, and finally, he would travel for work and most likely tied to a production schedule. Again, this is the first time a profile was made in Russia for a case and made from scratch. In February of 1988, Tatiana Ryzhov, who was 16 years old, had been a runaway who was actually killed in Andrei's own daughter's apartment. He then would dismember her body and would dump the remains, which then was subsequently found on March 9th. On March 7th, a 10-year-old boy named Yaroslav Makarov had been lured away from the railway station in Rostov and then was killed near the botanical gardens of that city. Sadly, yet another castration would take place, which happened more often than I want to admit in this story, but another odd thing was that Yaroslav's tongue was missing. I couldn't help but wonder, what was happening to all of these missing body parts? On June 11th, 1990, Andrei's last known victim was a 22-year-old woman named Svetlana Korostik, whose body had been found on November 13th in a woodland area, as she had been unfortunately homeless at the time that she was killed. It was said during the entire time killing, Andrei actually was keeping up with his own story in the newspapers and was said to change certain behaviors as needed to keep from getting caught. The authorities figured out transportation hubs were being used as a way to find victims, and then the killer could quickly move on. Then someone had the great idea that would lead to this sick fuck's capture, thankfully. They had the idea to show a huge police presence at all of the transportation hubs like trains and buses, and would then make a major scene to have the authorities talk to anyone who was standing or walking with a child. They did this at all of the local hubs and buses except for 3 locations, that were said to be Andrei's favorite places. Instead, they would have an undercover agent posted there to watch what was happening. Each of these 3 stations were said to be smaller and rural, so it wasn't hard to watch what was happening. On August 27th is when this secretive operation would take place. It didn't take long for Andrei to quote-unquote take the bait the police had set up. Andrei had noticed that the police had been talking to anyone with a child and then noticed the unattended stations exactly as they wanted. Apparently, the police had set this up prior to his last 2 victims, meaning that even with this going on, Andrei killed another little boy who did, in fact, fight back and bite Andrei. And then, of course, his last victim was Svetlana. It was said because Andrei had killed Svetlana surrounded by trees, when he got back to the train station, he had grass stains on parts of his body, along with some mud and dirt. But the telltale sign was the fact that he had a streak of something red on his face. The undercover agent who was posted at the train station was a man named Igor Rybakov, and he saw Andrei coming out of the woods after having killed Svetlana. As Andrei got closer to the station, Rybakov approached him and asked to see his papers. However, there wasn't an official reason for Andrei to be arrested, so he had to be let go. On November 13th, Svetlana's body would be discovered, and this is when Rybakov was called forefront to go through his reports for the entire week before. When Andrei Chikatilo's name came up, some of the more senior investigators recognized it, and they decided to take that lead and check it out. When they found out that Andrei had left 2 separate jobs as a teacher, they wanted to know more and went to those schools to inquire about Andrei. Of course, the schools had told the authorities about the allegations against him from various students. With this, the authorities decided to put Andrei under surveillance. The authorities saw him approaching young women and, of course, children, trying to talk with them, and this was enough for the police to grab him and bring him in for questioning. On November 20th, as Andrei was leaving his home, wanting to get his quote-unquote jar filled with beer, and as he was doing this, he was trying again to talk with children. He was just leaving a cafe, and as he was walking out, 4 officers not in uniform surrounded him and placed him under arrest. When they arrived at the police station, Andrei tried to tell the authorities that this was just a huge misunderstanding, and stated that when he was arrested in 1984 under the suspicion, he was already cleared and released. However, this time the authorities had a lot more evidence against him, but at the time it was only circumstantial evidence. One of the things they noticed when he was being searched was the fact that one of his fingers had been bitten pretty severely, and because they knew that his second-to-last victim, a boy named Viktor Tishenko, had bitten his attacker, they were able to match Viktor's teeth to the bite mark. The authorities then learned that even though Andrei's fingernail had been taken off and his bone was actually broken, he never tried to get help for the wound, he just treated it himself, which the authorities thought to be weird. They also found a knife and some rope on him inside of his clothes as well. The investigator Kostayev was smart in playing the angle of pretending that the person they were looking for was mentally ill, and this was in hopes that Andrei would confess without pressure to the horrific crimes in hopes that he could later on use the insanity plea. It was Russian law at the time. I'm not sure if it's still the same or not, but they would only have 10 days to produce results of some sort or they would have to release him. So the entire investigation team banded together just trying to come up with any proof that they could formally charge him with the crimes, and again, his blood type came up as A, even though samples from some of the crimes had come up as AB. However, the scientists who went on to publish their findings for this would say, in a stroke of rare luck, the semen and saliva samples that had come from Andrei somehow produced type AB. During the investigation of Andrei, he continued to claim his innocence until the authorities finally invited Dr. Bukanowski, the forensic psychologist, in to listen and watch Andrei during questioning. The doctor had actually examined all of the victims in this case and realized that Andrei fit the profile that he had put together about the suspect, as well as showing signs of some sort of mental illness or, in the least, mental irregularity. On November 27th, which was 7 days into their 10-day window, Dr. Bukanowski started reading different snippets from the profile that he had put together about the suspect, and this would end up being the very thing that got Andrei to break. It was said in one source that during this time, as the doctor was reading various things he believed to be true about the life and nature of the suspect, seeing how close it was to his own life caused Andrei to begin to cry, and then he was ready to spill. The rest of that evening, they left Andrei alone until the morning, which was actually the last day that they could legally hold him. I felt like this was a risky move. Like, if he started to break down and wanting to confess, wouldn't you jump on that opportunity no matter what time it was or how late? He could have had a change of mind and later decided that he wanted to take his chances and not say shit. Luckily, it didn't work out that way for them in this case, but personally, I think that could have been a huge mistake. The next morning, Andrei confessed to 36 of 38 murders that the authorities had suspected him of. There were, of course, some murders that he would later on confess to that he wasn't charged with, and some that had the exact same style of killings as Andrei, but he denied that couldn't really be connected to him and are still kind of a question mark. He was able to, however, recant with detail each of his murders, and there seem to be some photos of the recantations on the internet if you're interested in knowing more. Andrei even went as far as being able to sketch what the crime scenes looked like and how he left the victims. This would further solidify that he was the guy since no one else would have been privy to this information. He further told investigators that he started to figure out where the blood was going to land or the direction that it would gush, so he was able to dodge it to keep from being as messy. He would tell police that he would start to sit or squat next to his victims while they bled out, listening to them die and essentially enjoying it before he would mutilate them further after death. When they asked him why some of his victims had trauma to the eye sockets, he told them that he used to believe the theory that when a person died, the last image they saw was imprinted onto their eyes, and that he could get caught, so he would injure the eyes or remove them. He finally realized that that wasn't true and didn't feel the need to any further. While Andrei would tell authorities that he was a straight man, he did say that he found that he got the same satisfaction from males as he did females, which is probably because the act of killing and mutilation is what did it for him and not sex with the victim. However, here is where the cannibalism part comes in. He told authorities that he enjoyed not only tasting the blood of his victims as it was its own thrill, but also that he rather enjoyed chewing on different parts of his victims as well. From the male victims, he liked to chew or eat the testicles, and from his female victims, their uterus, which is probably why some of the victims had been disemboweled. He further confessed that sometimes he would swallow the nipples he bit off, and also the tongues of some of his victims. Oh, it's awful and gross, and holy shit, this guy, right? He's definitely one of the worst serial killers. So, officially, Andrei Chikatilo would be charged with 36 counts of murder. Later on, he would end up confessing to another 20 victims. On April 14, 1992, Andrei Chikatilo's trial would start, and you could see from the photos that he was kept behind like a little cage in the courtroom, and sources would say this was for his own protection. Apparently, it took 2 whole days in the court just to read out the list of indictments that he had, which was now 53 victims, and sadly, in the courtroom, the families of the victims were hysterical when their loved one was spoke about. Of course, which we could have probably guessed, but Andrei and his defense tried to claim that he was insane, and this was aided by random objections, rambling from Andrei, and one incident that was extremely famous from his trial, and this is when Andrei would open up his shirt and expose himself, apparently slapping his own penis and pulling on it in front of the entire court, asking if they really believed that he would be able to commit such heinous sexual acts with this quote-unquote useless thing. He was said to be uncooperative most of the time, but sometimes would comply with what was going on during his trial. Sometimes it got to the point where the judge had to have Andrei removed from the room, but the trial would proceed without him. The judge on this case, a Leonid Akubzanov, didn't buy his insane act for 1 second, and he ended up sentencing Andrei to death. Andrei, of course, tried to appeal his death sentence in the summertime of 1993, but this, of course, was rejected. Andrei resided in Novocherkassk until his execution date, which apparently at this time they didn't usually have to wait long for their death. Andrei Chikatilo was taken from his holding cell on February 14, 1994, and sat down in a chair inside of what some sources called a quote-unquote soundproof execution chamber. I guess at the time they used a silent and unknown person, presumably a man, to be what they called the trigger man, meaning the executioner. The executioner stepped out from behind the darkness behind Andrei, put a pistol called a Makarov up to his head, and placed it directly behind his right ear, and then pulled the trigger. And that, my friends, is the story of Andrei Chikatilo, the Red Ripper, the Rostov Ripper, or the Butcher of Rostov. Awful, right? Oh, this story breaks my heart and also fascinates me at the same time. I went through each and every victim, and it was so awful to see all of the loved ones taken by this sick piece of shit. I feel like there are some huge missed opportunities to catch this son of a bitch by the authorities just with the mindset alone of not thinking that serial killers could exist out there. I can't even imagine living in a time where people thought wherever they were living was so safe. And we hear this time and time again in true crime that some smaller areas where no one thought anything could ever happen and people didn't lock their doors had some crazy killers in their area. I am so glad to have made it out of the 80s and the 90s where we were all latchkey kids and were allowed to walk wherever and whenever, no matter how young you were, as long as you came back by dark. Parents, can you imagine now in 2025 telling your babies to get out and go play or go wherever, just come back at dark? No fucking way. I mean, I guess some people still do, but I sure as shit don't. I know where my children are at all times, each and every day, and I'm slowly learning to trust my child to pay attention to people and shit around them. It's terrifying, and for good reason, for people like this, Andrei Chikatilo, who destroyed countless lives and killed countless children. Believe me when I tell you that I spared you guys from just name after name of a child being killed and mutilated in the same way as the rest. I tried to just grab ones where something was different, or like the first and the last. And as horrible as it is to say the ones that show just how awful this man was, but again, this is nowhere near the entire list. I would encourage you guys to check out his Murderpedia page to see the list of victims, and I think his Wikipedia page may have the list as well. While Wikipedia isn't the best source to grab the summaries from, it's an awesome tool for other resources that someone used to kind of fill out that page, and you can find all sorts of books and links and articles just by checking out the Wikipedia pages on all of these freaks. All right, you guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this fucked up two-parter. Thank you for sticking with me. My allergy voice is not my best voice. I hope to see you guys come back next week, where we will cover another case here on The Kill File, where nothing stays buried forever. Stay safe, you guys. Bye. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today. A few quick reminders before you go. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on your platform. It will help The Kill File and other true crime lovers find us. Also, check out the website at TheKillFile.com to suggest a case. Find our merch shop for fun Kill File gear, which you can also find at thekillfile.printify.me and help support the podcast. Have a suggestion or want to share your own true crime stories? Email thekillfilepodcast@gmail.com for a chance to get them read on the podcast. Follow The Kill File on your favorite social media platforms. We are on Facebook, Instagram, X, Blue X, TikTok, and of course, you can subscribe on YouTube as well. Find all of the links for the socials on the website. We are either listed as The Kill File or The Kill File Podcast. Come on back Mondays wherever you get your podcast fix when we will cover another case here on The Kill File, where nothing stays buried forever. Stay safe, you guys. Bye.